a biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
And today's 2020, an opportunity to, honour some very special parents in our community, to talk about their special challenges, and even to introduce into that a faith dimension of how we as parents might think about raising a child with a disability. There are some very special parents in our communities who need an extra dimension of courage, and these parents who are entrusted with the love and nurture of a child who have a disability, you're in our sights today to be able to cheer you on and offer some insight. So often there are parents who need an extra dimension of love and of grace and of resilience. And our special guest today has a child with the most commonly inherited cause of intellectual disability and a leading known genetic cause of autism. And you know that the numbers of children who are being diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum seems to be growing. Well, every family has its challenges, but some families need extra strength and encouragement because in some cases, life can seem overwhelming. Well, Hannah Gair is the creator and host of the StrongHER Side podcast, designed for mothers raising children with disabilities or additional needs. Hannah is a mother of three, and one of her children has complex special needs. Hannah is joining us. Hannah, a special welcome along to 2020.
Thank you for having me today.
Hey, Hannah, let's start with parents' expectations. When we've got a new edition coming, everybody hopes that everything will be perfect. People count fingers and toes. And then there are other issues that develop that are not clearly seen early on. But how do you feel about parents? Everyone hopes their child will be perfect in every way, don't they?
I think there's that anticipation with your baby that everything will believe that it wasn't.
Hannah, I'm just getting you breaking up a little bit there. Let's hope this link doesn't fail us at all.
Fade out on us. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can. I was hearing you, but breaking up a little bit. But it might be your end, might be our end. Who knows where these things sometimes eventuate? But when parents have a child, there is a moment, isn't there, when the reality hits. I'm going to be a parent of a child with some special needs here.
Yes.
This is your story, isn't it? I mean, take us back to when you realised with one of your children who has a disability.
My story started when my son was actually in the womb, and he was a little fighter from the get-go. So in the initial stages of my pregnancy, I actually had something called a hematoma, and it surrounded 90% of the sac. And we actually thought at that time that it wasn't going to progress into what they called a viable pregnancy. So that first trimester, I was having a lot of blood tests. I was having a lot of ultrasounds. And once I got through to that 12, 13 week mark and we knew that it was a safe pregnancy, then I was all good to go. I thought it would be smooth sailing from there. It wasn't until my son was born, and it was on day 2 that he turned blue. And I was in the hospital, and it was one of those moments where it's your worst nightmare. So I had him in my arms. He was crying. He choked on what they call the amniotic fluid after birthing, which is actually quite normal. He couldn't get that up. And then within a matter of seconds, he was in the NICU unit being resuscitated. And that was the beginning of the journey for him.
Wow. I know that it would have been a very emotional time, and it really is amazing to me how you find that extra level of strength in those moments. Let me ask you, did you have family who had gathered around? Is there strength in numbers? Did you have a mother or a mother-in-law who was alongside, and maybe they're just as emotional and overwhelmed as you are, but there's strength in numbers here, isn't there? How was your support around that?
Well, at the actual time, I was by myself in the hospital, but what did result in it was shingles. So, because my nervous system actually got a fair whack in the Aussie sort of slang way of saying something. So I ended up being quite sick, and then I guess negotiating the new needs of my baby. Because after that, I was very watchful. I couldn't sleep, and obviously on high alert, wanting to make sure that he was breathing at all times. But then his story progressed, Neil, and what had happened, he ended up progressing so much he started vomiting and reflux to the point where we needed to put a tube in him for 9 months to feed him. And I literally at home had a makeshift hospital in my lounge room, and I nursed him. So that role of being a mother but kicking into being a carer came very early in my son's life. And that's what we see when mothers and fathers are raising children with disability. They go into that caring mode very, very quickly.
And, there's a big maturation process that goes on, isn't there, when you start to have children? Because you might not have known that there were dimensions in you that were able to rise to the needs that your child would expect and would need in those very, very fragile times. This is the thing, isn't it? You don't know what's within until the crisis comes. Was that like that for you?
That is really well articulated. And that is something that we as parents who are raising children with additional needs actually face. And I was saying this to another father who is in the same boat recently. There's almost not a language to express the depth that it actually causes and creates in you as a human being until you've lived it.
Okay, let me ask you about your child who has this disability. I mentioned in the introduction there, a child with the most commonly inherited cause of intellectual disability and a leading known genetic cause of autism. How do you describe the disability that you have with your child?
Yeah, so my son has something called Fragile X syndrome, and that's a genetic condition that causes intellectual disability, developmental delays, and behavioural challenges. We often see it accompanied with anxiety and sensory overload or sensory processing disorder. But it's a mutation, if I'm going to get a little technical here, on the FMR1 gene on the X chromosome. So basically there is what we call a repeat in the CGG within the DNA, and then, Fragile X is formed of this. So as a woman, I carry Fragile X, which I didn't know in my childbearing years. And that's how Sonny has, adopted it.
Yes. And, you're anticipating that there's going to be a special caring role for you right throughout your son's life now. And as you say, an intellectual disability, and there's going to be some learning difficulties. There's going to be some behavioural difficulties. And you're bracing yourself, no doubt, because you've got to make some adjustment because you have a child who has special needs.
Lots of adjustments, definitely. And I think the adjustments come with different seasons. So when you've got that newborn toddler sort of era, the adjustments is for him, and even into, his earlier years of a boy, up 5, 6, 7, 8, he's now 17. Going out into the community was very hard for him. With his sensory processing disorder, he shied away from the overload and the stimulation of going out every day. So life looks very different in different seasons. He can now go out when he is comfortable to people's houses, and we can go out for a certain amount of time into the community. But what we often see is that it's dictated by his response in that time.
Hannah, what has your faith, what's happened with you here? Were you a person with a Christian faith in your growing up years? Did you take a real hit when you're faced with something that didn't go just the way you thought it ought to. God in the issue here, your faith. How do you describe your faith, and maybe before and now? Just give us some insight here.
I think there was grief associated with the diagnosis. And what I mean by that is I had to put down the expectations of what I thought was going to be and pick up the reality of what is. So in that time, when he was officially diagnosed, there was a grappling, there was a season of grief, and there was a season of me trying to understand, you're right, a world that was turned upside down, to accepting what my and his future looked like. But inside of that, we know that the Psalm says that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And that was something that I absolutely cling to, and it brought comfort, because God knows he has made my son beautifully, and I wouldn't trade him in at all for any moment at any time. So in terms of what did it do to my faith, it's made me become bolder. It's given me opportunity to speak to other people about life, and I guess laying down expectations in seasons or when things don't go right for people, and picking up hope in a different way.
Is there an extra dimension of strength that comes because you have faith in God, because you recognise God the Creator, fearfully and wonderfully made, as you say? Does that encourage and strengthen you through the extra challenges you've got to bear?
Undoubtedly so. Absolutely. There is a peace that comes with knowing God. There is a peace in walking life with Him. It's undeniable, and it's hard to articulate if you haven't experienced that peace. And I know that He goes before, and I know that He's got great plans for my son. So there is comfort inside of that, knowing that He, as we just said, fearfully and wonderfully made perfect in His eyes.
Life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. This is 2020 with Neil Johnson on Vision Christian Radio.
Hannah, let me ask you about how you deal with the extra stress and pressure, because I know that in your podcast this week you're talking about even mothers burning out in the way that they're called on so dynamically to be so self-sacrificial and to deal with the needs, and sometimes this is overwhelming. How do you talk about this idea of mothers burning out? Is it a real challenge?
It is, and it's a very critical one, and thank you for bringing awareness to it. So we know that up to 77% of parents of children with complex care needs experience burnout. And there's not a lot of awareness around this because that caregiving is invisible. You can see it on a practical note where your mums are taking children to therapy sessions, they're navigating NDIS, they're going to, school meetings. It's quite a constant load that we carry. So carrying that extra weight is something that we need to talk about and bring awareness to, but also give our mums permission to actually step into, take a deep breath and actually recognise if she is at burnout and what that can look like and what that can mean for her.
And when you are experiencing some of those challenges, getting to the point where you're saying, I just can't go on, digging a little deeper and finding that extra strength, how do you describe ways that you might even practically take some time out or care for yourself in special ways? I mean, what do you do when you recognise you've got some of those symptoms of burnout?
Well, there's a few things that come to mind. Number one would be to firstly recognise it. Often we get told as mothers who are raising children with disability, I don't know how you do it. How are you so strong? And those, while they're compliments, they can also almost be a bit of a backhanded slap too, because it can silence us, meaning it doesn't allow us to go, actually, we're not strong at the moment. actually, I am feeling exhausted. Even small decisions are hard to make. So it's recognizing when you're at that space of burnout, and then having people around you, so community and family, friends who really lean into your world with empathy. And what that could look like is providing space for the carer, being the father or the mother, or whoever it is that's providing the care for your child, permission to go out and actually have time for themselves. Because the old mother guilt hat can kind of not come off because we're actually taking time out for ourselves. But the old saying also is you can't give what you don't have. So it's really critical that keeping your cup full is it's imperative to then be able to give the best life to your child.
Let me ask you about this word burnout for a few moments, because I can hear your heartbeat in there. It's wonderful to be able to have a platform like this. And here we are talking on the radio, and you've got your podcast, and you should talk about these things, and you should use the word burnout, but a little bit of caution the way you might use that in general conversation with your family and with your friends and with those other parents that you know who have a child with a disability, because sometimes you can get caught into a spiral, can't you? Because you might be talking about burnout. People assume you are about to burn out. All of a sudden, you've got a whole dimension that you've got to deal with. So caution in using the word. You might be aware of the possibilities, but sometimes you can get caught in a spiral if you start to say, I'm nearing burnout. What are your thoughts here?
Well, you can, but I think it's also very brave of somebody to recognize the way that they feel. But I do also agree in saying we need to be cautious in the way that we throw that word around. But the way to really find out where you sit is actually by seeking out professional help. The merry-go-round of a cycle, though, when you're caring for a child with a disability, and again, we see this in statistics, is although you might be feeling burnout or anxious or chronic depression, we know that these statistics are higher for our mothers. We also know that they very rarely reach out and get professional help. We also know that to diagnose something like burnout requires professional expert advice as well. So there's this cycle that often carers are in, and it's very hard to break out of that because we feel seeking out something that's going to help us, well, time is not our friend because we're either trying to hold down jobs, caring for our kids, getting them into different therapy sessions. So it's a bit of a cycle, to be truthful with you.
And you mentioned I guess it was the family and friends when you said, lean in with a little empathy to that mother who is responsible for a child with a disability, because that may actually be one of the more empowering things that anyone can do. Lean in, appreciate the challenge, and to be a cheerleader along the way. Would that be a way that, we're talking family and friends here, if you know someone who's got a child with a disability, this might be your best way of supporting?
Absolutely. Practical measures. They are one of the best things that you can provide any family with a child with a disability. I know, for instance, my mother-in-law, when we go over there for dinner, she always packs me up a dinner for the next night. So practical measures is something that we really are thankful for. Don't shy away from the conversations either. Often we feel that people or friends or whoever it is within our social circles may not know the politically right words to use, inverted commas. So it's hard to then step in and have the conversation. But what I'm saying is let's break down those barriers. It's okay if you don't get the question right. We know the heart, but check in and see how we're actually going.
Hannah, let's talk about Sonny for a few moments. Sonny's now 17 years old, so you've seen him through childhood, puberty, and now it's into adult years. So you're not new to this whole looking after kids with a disability. This is something you are now very well seasoned in, aren't you?
Yes, he is. He's in year 11. His final year of school is next year, and then he spreads his wings and goes into the bigger world, the larger world. as we know it.
How has schooling been when you've got behavioural challenges, all of those different dimensions that come with this intellectual disability? How's it been for you?
Look, school has been really positive. So Sonny's in a special needs school, which I'm very blessed to be able to say. There was advocacy, obviously, to get him inside of a special needs school. So he enjoys it. He's got great classmates and he's got great teachers and a great community that really teach him life skills on how to, take on adulthood as he enters into the next phase of his life.
Wow. Hey, a text here from Anne-Marie in Western Australia who says, wow, Hannah, you've articulated yourself beautifully. I'm going through the seasons with both my children, 18 and 16, who have autism and PDA, pathological demand avoidance. It sometimes is so hard. You've inspired me. Thank you, and may God bless you abundantly. There's lots of different dimensions, and not every child is exactly the same in all of this. How do you feel when you hear there's Anne-Marie's, who's just obviously very inspired by your ability to articulate these things?
Oh, thank you, Anne-Marie, and I'm thinking of you. We know from statistics that there's just under 1 million children in Australia that are touched by disability or additional needs, and that's an ABS statistic. So 12.1% between 0 to 24 years of children have additional needs or disabilities. So when I hear from Anne-Marie, we are navigating definitely a season of, we're not shy of, having the normal, inverted commas, complexities of raising children with teenagers rather. We then just have the added layer. So, Anne-Marie, you're doing a great job, and I hope the next season for you is fantastic.
Thanks so much for that text, Anne-Marie. Text us your insight on 0447 488 316. You can join our conversation on 1800 316 316. Let's take a call. Tammy is in Rockhampton in Queensland. Hey, Tammy, welcome along.
Oh, thank you very much.
Tammy, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I've been a carer for more than 20 years, and trying to navigate working as well as caring can be very difficult. I'm currently in burnouts in a really extreme way, and it is about NDIS. It's about systems that don't complement or work together, and then we're left with the overhang of emotions trying to support the person that needs it the most.
Wow. Okay. Thoughts here, Hannah, for Tammy?
Hi, Tammy. Yes. And that's something that it's funny that you mentioned that, because on this week's podcast, I talk about systemic barriers, and what you've just touched on is what I'm hearing from that as well. Although we have systems in place, and we're very grateful for the likes of the NDIS and for schools, etc., there are often battles that we face as parents to navigate, to help Catholics navigate NDIS system. Hearing that you're 20 years is a very long time, so I really encourage you to take a breath and to look at where you're sitting now and reach out and get some help if that's where you're up to.
I'm in the middle of that right now, and it's very hard to accept because, when you can't even communicate to the people who you love or care about you, it's not easy.
It isn't easy.
What would be helpful? What would be helpful for you right now?
I think that there are times when you turn to churches to need to have prayer, but they don't realise how bad it is.
Nobody appreciates the battle you are going through, and sometimes people in church might give you a polite smile and God bless you, and then you're on your way. I wonder if you've got any thoughts here, Hannah, because when there are people who are raising children with disabilities in church, sometimes they've got people who are really aligned and empathetic. Other times they're going about their own lives and they don't want to be disrupted by this. Thoughts from you, Hannah?
I think we should be walking through life slowly. And what I mean by that is people come across your path for a reason. And when I hear on the other end of the line, a mother in tears because she's just exhausted. I would encourage anybody who is walking through a church foyer to walk slowly and to really lean into the conversations and be open to providing support and practical support for our mums. It's actually a blessing.
Tammy, in your church experience, and every church is going to have this similar experience, are you feeling let down by your church? Or do you recognise that there's lots of reasons why people might not have the same empathy that you might hope they have?
I've attended lots of different churches, and most of the time for us it's been problems when it comes to acceptance. It has been problems when it comes to inclusion, just on how loud things are. And for us to attend church alone was very difficult. So every week it'd get louder and louder, and we're saying, look, it's just too loud. Where can we go to still be participating but not be overwhelmed? And that's when you're left to the back room. And you go, but that's not church.
Yeah, yep. You want to be able to be a part of a family in church, don't you? And, there's a message, isn't there, for listeners who are part of a church. They know somebody who is in a family and they're raising a child with a disability, and sometimes there are outbursts and sometimes there are some disruptions. Having a little bit of tolerance to be able to deal with that and being empathetic towards that family, that's what we need in church life. Thoughts from you, Hannah, on others who might be needing to adjust their own way of being accepting of people who are going through this challenge?
You raise a critical point, and what it highlights to me, and this is not from a heart of criticism, so please don't hear that in what I'm about to say, because that is not my heart. What I'm trying to create is awareness. But we often walk into churches and there's no facilities set up for children with additional needs. And we talk about outbursts. Those outbursts are normally come through from a sensory processing space where children are so riled up and they don't know how to express themselves. So what we see is the outbursts. That can often look like behavioural issues. And therefore, it's very easy to then feel like you're being judged from people around you. So what I suggest is anybody that is listening to this, disability, you don't have to scratch the surface too deeply to understand or know somebody that's touched by it. So it's always having a very gentle heart that is willing to not cast judgment, but to lean in with understanding, kindness and empathy.
Tammy, if I can ask you about your church experience again, you say you've been to a whole bunch of churches. Have any of those had a support group where you're able to align with other parents who have a child with a disability? And any insight from you around that? Or are there no churches in your community that actually have those sorts of support groups?
It appears that God wants us to live our own path, and unfortunately I think we had to accept that very early on. My youngest is now 22, and having 4 on the spectrum, it wasn't an easy navigation. Only probably 2 of those churches actually had a most supportive environment where if we're having a bad day, I can tell you, I can joke about it, but I arrived at church one day and we were on time. Now the difference is that I was in my pyjamas and my dressing gown.
Okay, all right.
I love it.
I said that was the church that I felt the most accepted. It didn't have any other children there, but they didn't bat an eyelid. And I'm going, well, would you rather me be on time where everyone else was okay, but I wasn't, and yet the other part was be late and then arrive in a total mess?
Turn up at church in your pyjamas, and that will signal to everyone that you actually didn't sleep well last night, but you made a big effort to get to church. You know,
well, it wasn't so much not sleeping well. It was more about the fact that I felt accepted because they didn't bat an eyelid about how I presented, and I was still there.
Yeah. Hey, let me pick up on something here and bring Hannah into this. Having a sense of humour, being able to joke about what may be the most serious and difficult circumstances of your life and the challenge that you have with these children. What are you thinking about a sense of humour, Hannah?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. I was at a school assembly for my son, and we were all sitting down on the little chairs, and I had my hair in a ponytail, and all of a sudden I could feel my hair being yanked by somebody, and I just grabbed my hair so my whole hair wasn't pulled out, and I could just smile to myself. I thought, what's a school assembly without a child coming up and pulling out my hair? You have to have a sense of humour. Life is meant to be joy-filled. It's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to have an essence that regardless of our circumstances, we can still smile, we still have hope. So having that sense of humour, and I laugh, like I find things that my son says, I call him iconic because of these one-liners that only he can say and get away with, but it just cracks up our whole family. And I think that that's really, really critical to have. Laugh, joy, just be playful.
You know, I've got Tammy, and I'll just keep Tammy on the line here because you both have gone through a long time. I think you said, Tammy, your oldest is 22. Have I got that right?
Youngest is 22.
Youngest is 22.
My eldest is now 27.
Okay, all right.
And it was exceptional to have 4 kids on the spectrum at that time, and my youngest is my lowest functioning. But, trying to be able to work together as a family and having structures in place that didn't make us look like we're the crazy ones. And you do get your weird sense of humour, and a lot of it is that, those one-liners that come out from a boy who's mostly selective mute, and you go, who did that come from? And it surprises everybody, That we've had a lot of joyful moments, and sometimes I think that when we used to go to church and we'd be in the bubble, and we joke about it because we would literally have no one sit in front of us, no one beside us and behind us. Mm. And we were at a church of 200 strong. And I don't know, whatever churches we used to go to, we used to find that just sitting next to, I used to take a notepad, a lollipop and a toy in my purse. And even now, sometimes I go and sit at the person who's got a disabled child, and we end up starting to draw to keep the child entertained while other people and the parent can actually focus on what's being said and absorb what's being learned. And it's really difficult at times when there isn't any other options.
Wonderful contribution to our conversation, Tammy. Can we pause a moment and pray for Tammy and for others who really are, hanging on every word, because this conversation is so important for parents who have a child with a disability. And maybe not me that prays, but maybe Hannah, are you open to praying while we've got Tammy on the line, and for other mothers who are finding themselves in the depths of despair, even as they try and manage life? Hannah, I'll throw to you that just a quick prayer, but would you lead us in prayer and keep Tammy in mind here?
Absolutely. Lord, thank you so much that Tammy has connected with us today, and we just want to hold her in prayer, and we just pray that you give her the strength just to keep going on and just the insight to love her children. And we just want to pray for all the other mums who are experiencing burnout or grief or whatever that valley is that they're in right now. May you lift them up. May you provide them joy, peace and hope. And we thank you that you are a God that listens and that you lean in and you hear our whispers. Amen.
Amen. Tammy in Rockhampton, thank you so much for a wonderful contribution to our conversation. You know what? Time's running short. There's so many dimensions that I know we could cover here, and maybe we can do this again on another day and tackle some of those then. People have all sorts of things going through their mind. Well, if God is truly loving, why didn't he heal our child who has a disability? Do you get these sorts of things come up from time to time? And when there's a prayer line at church going forward and receiving prayer, sometimes you can get cynical about that. When I've been prayed for, but nothing happened last time. But the prayer in all of this, God in the midst of our struggles, standing with us side by side, him being strong even in our weakness. How do you actually make sense of those sorts of things, Hannah?
That's another great point, Neil. I think it's coming down to acceptance. We can't I'm not saying that God doesn't heal. I've seen miracles in my own life and for other people. But when we have a heart of acceptance, then I feel that we can move into our next season. We don't have to sit in the dismay and the grief and the what ifs and how about me. I'm a huge believer in flipping a victim mindset into a survivor mindset. So that comes down to choice, and that's a completely different topic. I acknowledge that there is hardship, but I also know that we can still live a very full life, a very happy life with a child with a disability.
And you might be holding out for a miracle, but I love that sentiment. Let me just repeat what you just said. Moving from a victim mindset to a survivor mindset. My suspicion here is that it's your faith in God, who is the creator of our children, that's where that survivor mindset comes, because you know that your fearfully and wonderfully made child is a gift from God. You love them more than you can possibly even describe, and they are in your life, and you have an ability with your hope and your faith and expectation for the future that there will be good things that will come even when you're in the midst of hardship. Hey, let's just stretch things a little bit further. Barbara has called in from Western Australia. I don't want to miss the opportunity to hear quickly from Barbara. Barbara, need to be quick, but what are your thoughts?
Yes. I just think it's so refreshing to listen to what I have to say, because I had 5 children, which all had difficult, they weren't full on the spectrum, but they all had a sense of humour, definitely, and the one-liners. It is just so refreshing to hear that, because, you just have to get them through. And I said, I don't care if you're not a scientist, I don't care if, just as long as you can look after yourself and find something that you can do, in your adult life, because they're from 30 to 16 now. But the one-liners, like my daughter, she said, because her older sister was a hairdresser, and she said to this man who was bald, she says, my granddad has the same haircut as you.
Right. Wonderful stuff, Barbara.
And I'm like, shh. She's like, no. She was determined to say it.
And children with these sorts of intellectual disabilities are often inclined to tell it like it is, to speak it out in the most inappropriate moments. Hey,
look, my son didn't have any sense of humour, as a young man, a young child, and he would make us laugh because of the faces that he would pull. He'd get so upset because he didn't have a sense of humour. And then one day we had a quite playful cat, and I got the torch, and I said I moved the torch from side to side. I said, Princess, do you love me? And I did it up and down. The cat said yes, and I said, do you love Zach? And the cat went from side to side saying no.
Okay.
And he thought the cat didn't love him. But then he got it, and then he tried to do it back to me. I said, no prize is second best, mate.
Yeah. Oh, Barbara, thank you so much for calling through and just telling us your experience. And, our children have a sense of humour. They will grow and we'll love them just the same if we're in the circumstance where there's a disability or if not. And you know what? If you're a parent and your children don't have a disability, there's no guarantee your grandchildren might not. So preparing ourselves along these lines is certainly so important. Let me point listeners, the StrongHER Side podcast, Hannah has created and she's hosting the StrongHER Side podcast. It's designed for mothers who are raising children with disabilities or some additional needs. And we mentioned that Sonny, Hannah's boy, he's 17 years old. So there's some seasons through childhood into puberty and into adult years. You might want to have a listen in. You can find that podcast. Just simply Google StrongHER Side Project, Hannah Gair, Gair, and you'll be able to connect with that podcast and with Hannah. Hannah, just wonderful getting your insights. Thank you so much for taking some time to share those with listeners today on 2020.
Thank you, Neil. It's been very, very, very just fantastic.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.